She thought she was invisible. Just another waitress in a grease-stained apron, pouring coffee for truckers and keeping her head down. She had a fake name, a fake history, and a secret that could burn the city to the ground. But one rainy Tuesday, she made a fatal mistake. She didn't drop a plate, and she didn't spill a drink. She simply spoke 5 words in a language she was supposed to have forgotten. 5 words of comfort to a crying child. She didn't know the child belonged to Dante Rossi, the most dangerous capo in the city, and she didn't know that by speaking, she had just signed her own death warrant, or perhaps his. This is the story of the waitress who woke the dragon. The neon sign of Sal's 24-hour diner buzzed with an erratic, dying hum, casting a sickly pink glow onto the wet pavement of Fifth Avenue. Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee, frying bacon, and damp wool. It was 11 p.m. on a Tuesday in November, the kind of night where the rain didn't wash the city clean, but just made the grime slicker. Elena wiped down counter number 4 for the 3rd time in 10 minutes. Her movements were mechanical, practiced, rag in the left hand, spray bottle in the right. She kept her eyes low, her dark hair pulled back in a severe, messy bun that frayed at the edges. To the customers, she was nobody. Just honey, or sweetheart, or, "Hey, I need a refill." That was exactly how she liked it. Invisibility was a shield. Invisibility was survival. She checked the ticket rail. 2 orders of meatloaf, 1 extra rare burger for the trucker in the back booth. Routine. Safe. Then the bell above the door chimed. It wasn't the polite tinkle of a regular customer entering. It was followed immediately by the heavy thud of boots and a sudden, sharp drop in the diner's ambient volume. Conversations halted. Forks stopped halfway to mouths. Elena felt the shift in air pressure before she looked up. It was an instinct she had honed over 5 years of running, the ability to sense a predator entering the ecosystem. 4 men walked in. They wore suits that cost more than the diner itself, the wool tailored to hide the bulge of shoulder holsters. Rain dripped from their long coats. In the center of the formation was a man who looked like he owned the oxygen in the room. Dante Rossi. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, but her hand didn't shake as she set down the coffee pot. Every waitress in the city knew the face. Dante Rossi was the underboss of the Venetian syndicate, a man whose name was whispered in fear from the docks to the financial district. He was 32, with eyes like shattered glass and a jawline that looked carved from granite. He was beautiful in the way a loaded weapon is beautiful, sleek, cold, and promising violence. He didn't sit at the counter. He moved to the large, circular booth in the back, his men flanking him, taking up positions that offered clear lines of sight to the door and the kitchen. Elena turned to the cook, old Marcus. "I'm taking my break," she whispered, panic rising in her throat. "Not now, kid," Marcus grunted, flipping a patty. "Debbie called in sick. You're the only one on the floor. Go take their order. Big tippers, those guys." Elena swallowed the bile rising in her throat. Just be the waitress, she told herself. Be dull. Be forgettable. She grabbed her pad and walked toward the back booth. The floor felt like a tightrope. As she approached, she realized Dante wasn't alone with his soldiers. There was a child, a small boy, maybe 4 or 5 years old, sitting next to Dante. The boy looked out of place, dressed in a miniature version of a tuxedo, his eyes wide and wet with tears. He was trembling. Dante looked stressed, his usual icy demeanor cracked by irritation. He was on his phone. "I don't care that the nanny quit!" Dante hissed into the receiver, his voice a low baritone that vibrated through the booth. "I'm in the middle of a meet. Fix it. Now." He hung up and looked at the boy. Leo, stop crying. Men don't cry. The boy, Leo, only sobbed harder, a high-pitched, desolate sound that cut through the diner's quiet tension. Elena stepped up to the table. "Coffee?" she asked, her voice rasping slightly. She forced a flat, Midwestern accent, burying the lyrical cadence of her natural voice deep inside. One of the bodyguards, a brute with a scar running through his eyebrow, nodded. "4 blacks, and bring a milk for the kid." Dante didn't look at her. He was staring at the table, rubbing his temples. The boy, Leo, suddenly slid off the red vinyl seat. In his panic, he knocked over the sugar dispenser. The glass shattered against the tiled floor. Crash. The sound was like a gunshot. 2 of the bodyguards were on their feet instantly, hands flying to their jackets. Dante flinched, his hand moving to his waistband. The boy, terrified by the noise and the sudden aggression of the adults, began to scream. He scrambled backward, right into Eleanor. Without thinking, Eleanor dropped to her knees. The logic of self-preservation vanished, replaced by a dormant instinct. She caught the boy before he could step on the broken glass. He was thrashing, hysterical, speaking gibberish through his sobs. "Hey, hey," she soothed, holding his shoulders. But he was too far gone in his panic. Dante was standing now. "Leo!" he barked, his voice commanding. The boy flinched away from his uncle. He looked at Elena, his dark eyes pleading for safety. And then Elena slipped. The mask she had worn for 5 years cracked. She looked into the boy's tear-filled eyes and saw the specific, terrified geometry of a lonely childhood she knew too well. She forgot the diner. She forgot the fake name. She forgot Dante Rossi looming over her. She brushed the hair from the boy's forehead and whispered, soft and low, in a dialect that hadn't been spoken openly in this city for 20 years. It was an old Sicilian lullaby, specific to the coastal villages near Palermo. Non piangere, piccolo passero. La tempesta è solo un respiro del mare. Don't cry, little sparrow. The storm is only a breath of the sea. The effect was instant. Leo froze. He blinked, hiccuping, the familiarity of the rhythm calming his nervous system. He looked at her, mesmerized. "Mamma used to say that," the boy whispered in Italian. Elena smiled, a sad, genuine ghost of a smile. "I know," she whispered back in English, catching herself too late. "It's okay now." She stood up, brushing the glass shards from her apron, and turned to apologize to the table. She froze. Dante Rossi wasn't looking at the spilled sugar. He wasn't looking at his phone. He was looking at her. And he wasn't looking at a waitress anymore. His eyes were wide, the pupils blown. He looked like a man who had seen a ghost. The silence at the table was heavy, suffocating. "What did you just say to him?" Dante asked. His voice was dangerously quiet. Elena gripped her tray so hard her knuckles turned white. "Just something my grandmother used to sing. I'm sorry about the mess, sir. I'll clean it up." "That wasn't standard Italian," Dante said, stepping closer. He invaded her personal space, smelling of expensive tobacco and rain. "That was Sicilian, but not just Sicilian. That was the dialect of the Vitiello province." Elena's heart stopped. She forced a confused look onto her face. "I don't know about provinces, sir. Just a song from the old country." "Excuse me." She turned and walked away. She didn't run. Running was an admission of guilt. She walked to the kitchen, her legs feeling like lead pipes. Behind her, Dante Rossi didn't sit down. He watched her swinging hips, the fraying bun, the red sneakers. He watched her until the kitchen door swung shut. He turned to the scarred bodyguard. "Enzo." "Yeah, boss?" "The meeting is cancelled," Dante said, his eyes still fixed on the kitchen door. "Get the car ready." "What about the waitress?" Dante buttoned his jacket. The cold mask was back in place, but beneath it, a fire had been lit. Don't tip her, and don't scare her. Not yet. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a burner phone. He dialed a number. "It's Rossi," he said into the phone. "I need a full background check." Name tag said, "Elena. Works at Sal's on 5th. I want everything. Birth certificate, tax records, where she buys her toothpaste, and find out who her grandmother was." He paused, glancing at his nephew, who was now sitting calmly, humming the tune Elena had sung. "Because," Dante whispered, "I think I just found a ghost." The rain had stopped by 2 a.m., leaving the city in a heavy, humid mist. In the penthouse office of the Rossi Syndicate headquarters, a glass monolith overlooking the harbour, Dante Rossi stood by the window. He held a tumbler of scotch, but he hadn't taken a sip in an hour. The office was stark, modern, and cold. It lacked the warmth of the old Mafia dens. Dante ran his family like a Fortune 500 company, with ruthless efficiency and zero tolerance for error. But tonight, his efficiency was compromised. The door opened. Marco, his head of intelligence, walked in, holding a thin manila folder. Marco looked tired. "Well?" Dante asked, not turning around. "It's weird, boss," Marco said, tossing the folder onto the mahogany desk. Dante turned. He walked to the desk and flipped the folder open. It was thin. Too thin. "Elena Vance," Marco read from his notes. "Age 26, Social Security number issued in Ohio. Driver's license is valid. She pays her taxes on time. Lives in a studio walk-up in the Lower East Side. No criminal record. Not even a parking ticket." Dante scanned the documents. On paper, Elena Vance was the most boring woman in America. "So? What's the problem?" "The problem," Marco said, pointing to the credit history, "is the silence. Look at the date the SSN was issued. 5 years ago. Before that? Nothing. No high school yearbook photos, no yearbook records in Ohio, no parents listed on the birth certificate. It's a reissue. She didn't exist before 2020. Dante narrowed his eyes. "A witness protection placement?" "I checked with our contact at the Marshals." Marco shook his head. "She's not one of theirs, and she's not FBI. The cover is good, but it's black market good. It's the kind of ID you buy when you want to disappear from the face of the earth. Not when you're working for the government." Dante sat down, the leather chair creaking. He thought about the dialect. The Vitiello province. The Vitiellos were the Rossi family's greatest enemies a decade ago. A war that had ended in a massacre. The entire Vitiello bloodline had been wiped out in a fire at their estate in Palermo. Or so everyone thought. "The dialect," Dante murmured. She spoke the dialect to Leo. It calmed him instantly. "You don't learn that on Rosetta Stone, Marco. You learn that on a mother's knee." "You think she's connected?" Marco asked, his hand drifting to his gun. "If she's a Vitiello plant, we need to clip her. Tonight. She could be gathering intel." "No," Dante said sharply. "If she was an assassin, she would have poisoned my coffee, or Leo's. She saved Leo from stepping on glass. She comforted him. That was an emotional reaction, not a tactical one." Dante closed the folder. He remembered her eyes. They weren't the eyes of a killer, but they weren't the eyes of a waitress either. They were the eyes of someone who was constantly scanning for exits. "I want eyes on her," Dante ordered, 24/7. "I want to know who she talks to, where she goes, what she eats, but do not engage. If she senses she's being watched, she'll rabbit. And if she runs, we might never find out who she really is." "And if she spots the tail," Dante stood up, finishing his scotch in one burn. "She won't. Send the ghosts. The B team isn't good enough for this girl. I saw how she moved in that diner, Marco. She caught a falling glass jar with her left hand without looking. Her reflexes are trained. Marco nodded and left the room. Dante looked back out at the city lights. He felt a pull in his chest he hadn't felt in years. It wasn't just suspicion. It was intrigue. In a world of people who wanted to be famous, who wanted to be known, he had found a woman fighting with every breath to be nobody. Meanwhile, in a cramped apartment 4 miles away, Elena was packing a bag. Her hands were shaking now. The adrenaline from the diner had worn off, leaving behind a cold dread. She threw 2 pairs of jeans, a burner phone, and a stack of cash wrapped in foil into a duffel bag. He heard me, she thought, her mind racing. He heard the song. She cursed herself. 5 years of discipline. 5 years of dyeing her hair, wearing oversized clothes, faking a flat American accent, and she blew it because a child was crying. It wasn't just any song. It was the song her father, Don Alessandro Vitiello, used to hum to her while the Rossi family, Dante's family, burned their home to the ground. She was the only one who made it out of the cellar. She was the heir to a kingdom of ashes. If Dante knew who she was, he wouldn't just kill her. He would torture her to find the locations of the old Vitiello vaults, the millions of dollars her father had hidden before the war. Money she hadn't touched because touching it meant pinging the radar. Elena zipped the bag. She moved to the window and peeked through the blinds. A black sedan was parked across the street. The engine was off, but the windows were tinted. It hadn't been there when she came home. They're already here. She stepped back from the window, her heart slamming against her ribs. If she ran now, with a bag, she confirmed their suspicions. If she tried to leave via the fire escape, they'd chase her. She looked at the bag. Then she looked at the uniform on her chair. If she ran, she died. If she stayed, she might die, but she could buy time. She had to convince them they were wrong. She had to outplay Dante Rossi. She unpacked the bag. She put the cash back in the vent. She threw the clothes back in the drawer. She walked to the bathroom mirror. She looked at the terrified woman staring back. She washed her face with cold water. "You are Elena Vance," she whispered to the mirror. "You are a waitress from Ohio. You don't know Italian. You don't know guns. You are stupid and slow and boring." She repeated it until her pulse slowed. The next morning, Elena walked out of her apartment building. She didn't look at the black sedan. She didn't check for tails. She put headphones in her ears and walked to the subway, stopping to buy a bagel like she did every single day. But as she walked, she felt eyes on her. Not just the men in the car. She felt him. Dante. She arrived at the diner for the morning shift. The bell chimed. She looked up, expecting regulars. It was Dante. Alone. No bodyguards, no child. He was wearing a casual leather jacket and jeans, looking less like a Mafia don and more like a movie star on a day off. He sat at the counter, right in her section. He placed a handgun on the counter, not threateningly, just laying it there like a wallet or a set of keys. A Beretta 92FS. Elena froze, the coffee pot in her hand. Dante looked up at her, his eyes dancing with a dangerous amusement. "Good morning, Elena," he said, saying her name like he was tasting it. "I believe we got off on the wrong foot last night. I'm Dante, and I think you and I have a lot to talk about." He tapped the barrel of the gun with his index finger. "Pour me a cup," he said softly, "and try not to speak Italian this time. It makes me nostalgic." The diner was quiet, save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant siren of a police cruiser on 7th Avenue. At counter seat number 4, the Beretta 92FS sat on the Formica surface, heavy and black, a stark contrast to the cheerful yellow napkin holder next to it. Elena stared at the weapon. Her training, the years spent at the shooting range in Palermo under her father's watchful eye, screamed at her to grab it, check the safety, and aim for the center mass of the man sitting in front of her. But Eleanor the waitress did what she was supposed to do. She dropped the coffee pot. It shattered on the floor, splashing hot brown liquid over her sneakers and the hem of her jeans. "Oh, God!" she gasped, jumping back, her hands shaking violently. "Sir, you can't have that in here. I have to call the police." Dante Rossi didn't flinch at the shattering glass. He didn't even blink. He just watched her pupils. He was looking for the dilation of combat readiness, the tensing of the trapezius muscles. Instead, he saw clumsy fear. Or at least a masterclass performance of it. "Relax, Elena," Dante said smoothly, sliding the gun back into his jacket holster with a movement so fluid it was almost invisible. "It's licensed. I have a permit. I'm just sensitive to my surroundings." He picked up his coffee cup, which she had poured before the gun appeared, and took a slow sip, his eyes never leaving hers over the rim. "You didn't answer my question yesterday. About the song." Elena grabbed a wad of paper towels and dropped to her knees to clean the coffee mess. It was a submissive position, one that usually made men like Dante feel dominant and safe. It was a calculated move. "I told you," she said from the floor, her voice muffled. "My grandmother. She was from Italy. She died when I was 10. I don't know anything about provinces or dialects. I just remember the tune." "What was her name?" "Maria," Elena lied. It was the most common name in Italy. "Maria Rossi, actually. Funny coincidence, right?" Dante chuckled, but the sound lacked humor. "Maria Rossi, a generic name for a generic girl. But you're not generic, are you? I ran your file, Elena. You've never had a speeding ticket. You've never been late on rent. You have a credit score of 750. You are statistically improbable. No one is that perfect unless they are hiding something." Elena stood up, dumping the wet towels in the trash. She needed to go on the offensive, just a little, to sell the annoyed waitress act. "Look, Mr. Rossi," she said, planting her hands on her hips. "I don't know who you think I am. I'm just trying to pay my rent. If you're going to harass me, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. I don't care who you are." Dante raised an eyebrow. "You don't care who I am? That's interesting, because most people in this city tremble when I walk in. But you just drop coffee pots." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card. It was thick, black cardstock with gold embossing, simply reading, "Rossi Import, Export." "I need a nanny," he said abruptly. Eleanor blinked, thrown off guard. "What?" "My nephew, Leo, the boy you met. He liked you. He hasn't spoken to a stranger in 6 months since his parents died. But he spoke to you." Dante slid the card across the counter. "I went through 3 nannies in 2 weeks. They're either terrified of me or they try to seduce me. Leo hates them all. But he asked for the singing lady this morning." "I'm a waitress, not a nanny," Elena said, her heart pounding. This was dangerous. Getting closer to Dante was suicide, but it was also an opportunity. If she was inside his house, she could find the location of her father's seized assets. She could finish what she started. No, she told herself. Too risky. "I can't," she said. "The pay is 5,000 a week," Dante said casually. "Cash, plus room and board at the estate." Elena choked on air. 5,000 a week. That was 6 months of wages at the diner. "I have a life here," she insisted, though her voice wavered. "You have a studio apartment with a leak in the ceiling and a job that pays tips," Dante corrected her. "I'm offering you a way out." He stood up, buttoning his jacket. Think about it. I'll be back tomorrow. He turned to leave, but stopped at the door. Oh, and Elena. She looked up. Clean up the glass carefully, he said, his voice dropping an octave. I'd hate to see you bleed before I decide what to do with you. As the door closed, Elena leaned against the counter, her legs giving out. He knew. He didn't know what he knew, but he knew something was wrong. She looked at the card. Rossi. The name that had haunted her nightmares. And now he was inviting her into the wolf's den. She didn't know that outside, across the street, a man in a grey hoodie was photographing her through the diner window with a telephoto lens. The man wasn't working for Dante. He dialed a number on a satellite phone. I found her, the man whispered in Russian. The Vitiello girl. She's in New York. And guess who she's talking to? Dante Rossi. A pause, then a laugh on the other end. Perfect. We killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Get the team ready. 3 days later, Elena was walking home from the late shift. It was 2 a.m. The streets of the Lower East Side were empty, the streetlights casting long, skeletal shadows against the brick buildings. She had ignored Dante's offer. She hadn't seen him since the diner. She assumed he had moved on, found some other poor girl to watch his traumatized nephew. She turned the corner onto her block and stopped. The hair on the back of her neck stood up. The silence was wrong. The usual sounds, the distant traffic, the hum of AC units, seemed dampened. She reached into her purse, her hand wrapping around the small pepper spray canister. It was a civilian weapon, pathetic compared to what she knew how to use, but it was all she allowed herself to carry. She took 2 steps. A black van screeched around the corner, mounting the curb and cutting off her path. The side door slid open. Elena didn't scream. She didn't freeze. She dropped her center of gravity and pivoted on her heel, sprinting back the way she came. But a second car, a sedan, blocked the retreat. 4 men jumped out. They weren't wearing the tailored suits of the Italian mob. They wore tracksuits and leather jackets. Russians, the Bratva. Get the girl, one of them shouted. Elena saw an alleyway to her left, a narrow gap between a bakery and a laundromat. She dove for it. Not so fast, Princessa. A massive man blocked the alley entrance, grabbing her arm. Elena's instinct took over. She couldn't play the waitress anymore. If she didn't fight, she would be taken to a basement and tortured. She stomped on the man's instep, shattering the small bones in his foot. As he bent over in pain, she drove her elbow into his temple. It was a precise, military-grade strike. He dropped like a sack of cement. She spun around, scanning for threats. 3 more men were closing in. Suddenly, tires squealed. A silver Maserati roared down the street, headlights blinding the attackers. The car didn't slow down. It rammed the Russian sedan, metal crunching with a sickening shriek. The driver's door flew open. Dante Rossi stepped out. He held a silenced pistol in each hand. Foot, foot, foot. 3 shots. 3 bodies hit the pavement. Dante moved with a terrifying grace, stepping over the fallen men. He didn't look at them. He looked at Elena, who was standing over the unconscious giant she had just dropped. Dante looked at the giant, then at Elena. His eyes narrowed. Waitresses don't know how to do a Krav Maga elbow strike, Elena, he said, his voice calm amidst the carnage. Before she could answer, bullets sparked against the brick wall next to her head. More Russians were pouring out of the van. Get in the car! Dante roared, abandoning the interrogation. Now! Elena didn't argue. She scrambled into the passenger seat of the Maserati. Dante dove into the driver's side, throwing the car into reverse while firing out the window. They sped away, leaving the chaos behind. The car ride was silent for 10 minutes. Dante drove like a maniac, weaving through traffic, running red lights, constantly checking the rearview mirror. Finally, when they were on the highway heading out of the city, Dante slowed down. He glanced at her. Elena was clutching her seatbelt, her chest heaving. "Who were they?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Russian bratva," Dante said. "They've been trying to move into my territory for months. But they weren't there for me, Elena. They were waiting for you. They called you Princess." He slammed the brakes, pulling the car onto the shoulder of the empty highway. He turned to her, the interior light illuminating the fury in his eyes. "Who are you?" he demanded. "And don't tell me you're a waitress. The Russians don't send a hit squad for a waitress, and a waitress doesn't take down a 250-pound enforcer in 3 seconds. Elena looked at him. She was trapped. If she told the truth, "I am Elena Vitiello, the daughter of the man your father murdered. He would kill her right here." "I had a stalker," she lied, improvising wildly. "An ex-boyfriend. He's connected to them. He taught me self-defense." Dante laughed. It was a cold, disbelieving sound. "An ex-boyfriend, right. And I suppose this ex-boyfriend also taught you obscure Sicilian dialects?" He reached over and grabbed her chin, forcing her to look at him. His touch was firm but surprisingly gentle. "You're a liar, Elena. A beautiful, dangerous liar. But right now, you're a liar with a target on your back. If I leave you here, the Russians will find you in an hour, and they won't be as polite as I am." "So what are you going to do?" she whispered. "Kill me?" Dante looked at her lips, then her eyes. "No. I'm going to take you home. You're taking the job. You're going to watch Leo. And while you're doing that, I'm going to find out exactly who you are." He put the car back in gear. "Welcome to the family, Elena." The Rossi estate was a fortress disguised as a mansion. Located on the cliffs of Long Island, it was surrounded by 12-foot walls, cameras, and armed guards patrolling the perimeter with Dobermans. Elena was given a room in the East Wing, next to the nursery. It was nicer than any apartment she had ever lived in. Silk sheets, a balcony overlooking the ocean, a walk-in closet filled with clothes that were exactly her size. He bought these, she realized, running her hand over a cashmere sweater. He's been planning to bring me here. For the first week, Elena was a prisoner in paradise. She wasn't allowed to leave the grounds. Her phone had been taken. Her only company was Leo and the staff. But Leo was a delight. The boy, traumatized and silent with everyone else, blossomed around her. They spent hours in the garden. She taught him to draw. She sang to him. Careful, always careful, to use English songs now. Dante was a ghost. She saw him leaving in the mornings in his armored SUV and returning late at night. Sometimes she would feel him watching her from his office window while she played soccer with Leo on the lawn. One evening, a week after the attack, a storm rolled in. Thunder shook the house, rattling the antique windows. Leo woke up screaming. Elena rushed into his room. The boy was thrashing in his bed, caught in a night terror. "Leo, it's okay, I'm here," she soothed, climbing onto the bed and pulling him into her arms. The door flew open. Dante stood there, a gun in his hand, wearing only sweatpants. His chest was bare, revealing a tapestry of scars, knife wounds, bullet holes, the road map of a violent life. He saw Elena holding Leo, saw the boy calming down under her touch. He lowered the gun. "Is he okay?" Dante asked, his voice rough with sleep. "Just a nightmare," Elena said softly, stroking Leo's hair. The thunder scared him. Dante walked into the room. He looked helpless for a moment, stripped of his suits and his authority. He sat on the edge of the bed. "He reminds me of my brother," Dante said quietly. "His father. He was afraid of storms, too. It was the first time Dante had spoken to her like a human being, not an interrogator. "What happened to them?" Elena asked, risking the question. "His parents?" Dante's jaw tightened. "Car bomb, 6 months ago. It was meant for me." Elena felt a pang of guilt. She hated the Rossis. They were monsters. But looking at this man, sitting on a child's bed, haunted by his own survival, the black and white picture of her revenge began to blur. "I'm sorry," she said. Dante looked at her. In the dim light of the nightlight, the tension between them shifted. It wasn't fear anymore. It was something magnetic. "You're good with him," Dante said. "Better than anyone I've ever seen. Who taught you that? Your ex-boyfriend?" Eleanor looked down. "I grew up in a big house," she said, letting a sliver of truth slip out. "With a lot of noise. Silence was precious. I learned how to create it." Dante reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His fingers lingered on her jaw. Elena stopped breathing. "You're not who you say you are," Dante whispered. "I know that. My men are tearing Ohio apart, looking for the real Elena Vance. And they can't find a single person who remembers you from high school." He leaned in closer. "But right now, I don't care, because you're the only thing keeping my nephew sane. And—" He didn't finish the sentence. He stood up abruptly, the mask slamming back into place. "Get some sleep, Elena. Tomorrow is the gala. You're coming with me." "The gala?" Elena asked, confused. "The governor's charity ball," Dante said, walking to the door. "I need a date. And since you're living in my house, eating my food and wearing my clothes, you're it." "I don't have a dress," she stammered. Dante smirked over his shoulder. "Check the closet in the morning. And Elena? Wear the red one. It's the color of war." The next night, the governor's ball. The ballroom of the Plaza Hotel was dripping with crystals and corruption. The city's elite, judges, politicians, mobsters trying to look legitimate, were swirling around the dance floor. Elena felt exposed. The dress Dante had chosen was a stunner, a floor-length crimson gown with a slit up the thigh and a back that plunged dangerously low. It fit like a second skin. She wore diamond earrings that probably cost more than the diner she worked at. Dante held her arm firmly as they navigated the room. He was in a tuxedo, looking every bit the devastating prince of the city. "Smile," he whispered in her ear. "Everyone is watching. They want to know who the mystery woman is." "They're staring because I look like a mistress," Elena muttered. "They're staring because you're the most beautiful woman in the room," Dante said, his voice devoid of mockery. "And because you're with me." They were approached by a heavy-set man with a cigar. Don Salvatore, head of the Genovese family. "Dante!" Salvatore boomed. "And who is this lovely creature?" "This is Elena," Dante said. "She's with me." Salvatore kissed Elena's hand. He held it a moment too long. He squinted at her. "Elena," Salvatore murmured. "You have a familiar look, cara mia." The eyes. I've seen those eyes before. Very distinctive, almost vitiello eyes. Elena's blood turned to ice. Salvatore had known her father. He had been at the confirmation parties when she was a child. Dante stiffened. He felt Elena's pulse spike through her arm. "You're mistaken, Sal," Dante said coldly. "Elena is from Ohio, cornfields and football." "Is that so?" Salvatore didn't look convinced. "Well, enjoy the evening." As Salvatore walked away, Dante pulled Elena onto the dance floor. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her flush against him. "Why did he say that?" Dante demanded in a whisper, spinning her into a waltz. "Why did he say you have vitiello eyes?" "I don't know," Elena gasped. "He's an old man. He's crazy." "The Vitiellos are dead," Dante said, staring intensely into her eyes. "My father burned their estate 10 years ago. Alessandro Vitiello and his wife died. Their daughter was never found. They said she burned to ash in the cellar." He spun her again, dipping her low. "She would be about your age now, Elena." Elena looked up at him. She was inches from his lips. She could kiss him, or she could kill him. The knife she had strapped to her thigh under the dress was small, but sharp. "I'm just a waitress, Dante," she whispered. "We'll see," Dante said. Suddenly, the music stopped. A scream rang out from the entrance. Men in ski masks were storming the ballroom. Shotguns pumped. "Get down," Dante shouted, tackling Elena to the floor as the chandeliers above them shattered under a hail of gunfire. The first bullet shattered a magnum of champagne on a waiter's tray, spraying the nearest guests with glass and foam. The screaming started a split second later, a chaotic, terrified chorus that drowned out the dying notes of the orchestra. Dante Rossi didn't scream. He moved. He shoved Elena beneath a heavy oak banquet table, the tablecloth draping over them like a shroud. Above them, the air turned into a storm of lead. The Bratva hit squad was spraying the room with reckless abandon, not caring who they hit as long as they pinned down the Rossi leadership. "Stay here," Dante commanded, drawing a backup pistol from his ankle holster. His face was a mask of cold fury. "Don't be an idiot," Elena hissed, grabbing his wrist. "There are 8 shooters. I counted them on the balcony. You have 1 gun. You'll be dead in 10 seconds. Dante looked at her, stunned by the sudden shift in her tone. The trembling waitress was gone. In her place was a tactician. "Stay down, Elena!" he barked, pulling away and rolling out from under the table. He popped up, firing 2 controlled shots. One attacker on the staircase fell, tumbling down the red carpet. But the return fire was withering. Bullets chewed up the floorboards inches from Dante's boots, forcing him behind a marble pillar. Elena watched from beneath the table. She saw what Dante couldn't see. To his left, a gunman was flanking him, moving silently through the panic of the fleeing crowd, using the guests as human shields. He was raising a silenced Uzi, aiming at the back of Dante's head. Elena didn't think. She didn't calculate. The dormant code in her DNA, written by generations of Vitiello warlords, executed a command. She saw a dead bodyguard lying 3 feet away. His gun, a Sig Sauer, was lying on the carpet. Elena scrambled out from under the table. She slid across the floor on her knees, the silk of her red dress tearing, ignoring the glass slicing into her skin. She grabbed the gun. She rolled onto her back, assuming a supine firing position. She exhaled. Pop, pop. 2 shots. Center mass. The flanker dropped before he could pull the trigger on Dante. Dante whipped around, hearing the shots come from behind him. He saw the dead gunman. Then he looked down. Elena was lying on the floor, the smoking gun held in a perfect 2-handed grip. Her eyes were wide but steady. She looked at him, then scrambled to her feet. "Move!" she screamed at him. "The kitchen exit! Go!" Dante didn't argue. He grabbed her hand and they ran. They moved as a unit, weaving through the chaos. When a Russian stepped out from behind an ice sculpture, Dante shot him. When another blocked the kitchen doors, Elena didn't hesitate. She fired, suppressing him so Dante could close the distance and finish it. They burst into the kitchen, startling the chefs. They sprinted through the back alley and into the rainy night. Dante's car was blown up, a burning wreck at the valet stand. "We need a car," Dante growled, scanning the street. "Hotwire that Honda." Elena pointed to an older sedan. "It doesn't have an immobilizer." Dante looked at her again, a look of terrifying curiosity, but smashed the window and started the car. They peeled out onto 5th Avenue just as the police sirens began to wail in the distance. They drove in silence for 20 minutes. The adrenaline was fading, replaced by a cold, sharp reality. Dante didn't drive to the estate. He drove to a shipping yard in Brooklyn, pulling the car into an empty container warehouse. He killed the engine. The silence in the dark warehouse was deafening. Dante turned to her. The dashboard lights cast deep shadows over his face. He looked at the gun still in her lap. Then he looked at her eyes. "You cleared the jam on that cig in the kitchen," Dante said quietly. Tap, rack, bang. Muscle memory. You didn't even look at the weapon. Elena didn't answer. She stared straight ahead. "And you counted the shooters on the balcony before the first shot was fired," Dante continued, his voice rising. "Waitresses don't do that. Nannies don't do that." He reached over and snatched the gun from her lap, tossing it into the back seat. Then he grabbed her shoulders, pinning her against the car door. "Who are you?" he roared. "Tell me the truth, or so help me God, I will leave you here for the rats." Elena looked at him. The game was over. The wig, the accent, the lies, they had all burned up in the ballroom. "You know who I am," she said, her voice dropping to her natural, lower register. She spoke in Italian now, the pure, aristocratic Italian of the old families. "My name is Elena Alessandra Vitiello, daughter of Don Alessandro, the man your father burned alive." Dante froze. He released her shoulders and sat back, exhaling a long, shaky breath. "I knew it," he whispered. "I knew it the moment you sang that song, but I didn't want to believe it. I wanted you to be just a girl. Just Elena." "I am Elena," she said, her eyes flashing with tears she refused to shed. "But I am also the only thing left of a family you destroyed." "Why didn't you kill me?" Dante asked. "You had a gun. You were behind me. You could have put a bullet in my brain and ended the war right there." "I don't know," Elena admitted, her voice breaking. "Maybe because you're the only person in 5 years who looked at me and saw a person, not a target. Or maybe because you saved me from the Russians in the alley." "I saved you because I wanted to own you," Dante said brutally. "Because I collect broken things." "And I saved you because I'm tired of death," Elena shouted back. "I'm tired of the blood, Dante. I came to New York to hide, not to fight. But you dragged me back in." Dante stared at her. The tension in the car was electric. Hate, lust, fear, and respect swirled together in a volatile cocktail. "The Russians didn't find us by accident," Dante said, his mind shifting gears back to survival. "Someone told them we would be at the gala. Someone told them you were with me." "Salvatore," Elena suggested. "He recognized me." "No, Salvatore is old school. He wouldn't work with the Bratva. They're animals." Dante gripped the steering wheel. "It's someone inside, someone close." His phone buzzed. He picked it up. It was a text from Marco, his head of intelligence. "Boss, are you okay? We have the estate locked down. Leo is safe. Bring the girl here." Dante stared at the screen. "What is it?" Elena asked. "Marco," Dante said. "He says the estate is locked down. But I never told him we escaped. I never told him we were alive." Dante looked at Elena. If the Russians hit the gala and failed, their plan B would be the house. They'd go for the leverage. Elena's face went pale. "Leo." "Marco sold us out," Dante realized, the betrayal twisting his gut. "He's not protecting the estate. He's holding it for them." Dante started the car. The engine roared to life. "Where are we going?" Elena asked, checking the magazine of the gun she had retrieved from the back seat. "We're going home," Dante said, his eyes turning into black pits of violence. "And we're going to burn it down." The storm outside mirrored the violence waiting inside. Dante and Elena left the stolen car in the woods and scaled the treacherous sea cliffs behind the Rossi estate. The wind howled, threatening to tear them from the rock face, but they moved with grim determination. By the time they pulled themselves over the terrace balustrade, they were soaked, bleeding, but alive. Inside, the house was a tomb. In the east wing hallway, they found 2 of Dante's loyal guards dead. Marco, Dante realized, his jaw tightening. He didn't just open the gates, he cleared the board. They reached the double doors of the main study. Dante held up 3 fingers, counting down. On one, he kicked the door open. The scene inside was a nightmare. Marco sat comfortably behind Dante's desk, sipping scotch, flanked by 4 heavy-set Russian enforcers. In the center of the room, little Leo sat frozen on a wooden chair, a gun pressed to his temple by the Russian leader. "Dante," Marco smiled, though his eyes betrayed his fear. "I knew you were too stubborn to die." "Let the boy go, Marco," Dante said calmly, stepping into the light. "I can't do that, boss," Marco sneered. "The Bratva promised me the city. You were going soft, making deals with unions. I need the keys to the kingdom." "And the girl?" the Russian grunted, digging the barrel into Leo's skin. "The girl is here," Elena announced, stepping out from behind Dante. She looked like a vengeance spirit, dress torn, hair wild, eyes burning. Marco laughed. "Ah, the waitress. Or should I say, the Vitiello stray. We found your file eventually." Dante met Elena's eyes. A silent command passed between them. A desperate plan they hadn't spoken aloud, but understood perfectly. "The Vitiello gambit." "You're right, Marco," Dante shouted. "I did go soft. I forgot the old ways. But Elena, she remembers." "Remembers what?" Marco frowned. "The gas main," Elena said. She raised the Sig Sauer she had taken from the ballroom. She didn't aim at the men. She aimed at the antique gas valve next to the massive fireplace. Bang! The bullet sheared the valve. Gas hissed into the room. "Shoot her!" Marco screamed. The Russian leader fired at Elena, but the muzzle flash ignited the gas. Boom! A massive fireball rolled across the ceiling, blowing out the windows. The shockwave threw the Russians backward. Dante didn't flinch. He dove for Leo, shielding the boy's body with his own as debris rained down. Elena moved through the smoke like a phantom. She shot the first disoriented Russian in the knee, then the head. She spun and dropped the second. Marco, coughing and blinded by smoke, scrambled toward the exit. He ran straight into Elena. She stood firm, the gun leveled at his chest. "Elena, wait," Marco pleaded, backing away. "I can help you. I know where the money is." "I don't want the money," she said coldly. She pulled the trigger. Click. The gun was empty. Marco's fear turned to a vicious grin as he reached for his own weapon. "Too bad, princess." Bang! Marco's smile vanished. He looked down at the hole in his chest, then collapsed. Behind him stood Dante, holding a smoking pistol. Dante kicked the gun away and pulled Elena into his arms, burying his face in her neck. They stood there in the ruins of the study, soaked by the sprinklers, holding a sobbing Leo between them. "It's over," Dante whispered. "It's done." 6 months later. The for sale sign was gone from the diner on Fifth Avenue. It was a bistro now, but uptown in the penthouse of the Rossi Tower, a new empire had risen. The office was warm, renovated with velvet and mahogany. Elena stood by the window, looking out at the city she once hid from. She wore a tailored black suit, her head held high. Dante walked in, wrapping his arms around her waist. The commission agreed to the terms. No more street wars. We're fully legitimate. "And the Vitiello lands?" Elena asked. "Returned to the rightful heir." Dante kissed her cheek. "You." Leo burst into the room, holding a crayon drawing. He was laughing, the trauma of that night fading into a distant memory. "Look, I drew us." He held up a picture of 3 stick figures holding hands. The woman in the middle wore a jagged yellow crown. "Is that a crown?" Dante teased. "Yes," Leo said seriously, "because Elena is the queen." Dante looked at Elena, the waitress who became a warrior, the orphan who became a matriarch. "He's right," Dante said, taking her hand. "Long live the queen." Elena smiled, whispering the word that had started it all in the diner, but this time it was a promise. Sempre. Always. And that is the story of Elena, the waitress who was so much more than she seemed, and Dante, the Mafia boss who found his match in the most unlikely of places. From the grease-stained counters of a diner to the blood-soaked floors of a mansion, they proved that sometimes love isn't about flowers and chocolates. It's about who you can trust to hold the gun while you drive the getaway car. They started as enemies, bound by a blood feud that destroyed their families. They ended as rulers, forging a new empire from the ashes of the old. It's a reminder that even in the darkest worlds, redemption is possible, and that the quietest people often have the loudest stories to tell. Wow, what a ride! I hope you guys enjoyed this twisty, intense Mafia romance saga. I honestly didn't see that betrayal coming from Marco. If you loved this story and want to see more dramatic tales like this, maybe a Wild West drama or a military thriller next, make sure to smash that like button. It really helps the channel. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification so you never miss a new story. I post new videos every week. Let me know in the comments. If you were Elena, would you have forgiven Dante, or would you have taken the money and run? I want to hear your thoughts. Thanks for watching, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next story.